It was an unbelievable sight. A fully grown brown bear, 800 pounds of raw strength, charging through the security fence of a military base in Alaska, not with aggression, but with desperation. The three soldiers who witnessed this unimaginable event could hardly believe their eyes as the bear barreled toward the commander's office, only to do something no one could have anticipated: bow its head and wait. As the soldiers tried to make sense of what was happening, a terrifying truth began to emerge. This wild animal, known for its ferocity, had risked everything to seek help from humans. Lieutenant Scott Parker, a seasoned military officer, had seen his fair share of strange occurrences during his 15 years in service, but this was something entirely beyond the realm of explanation. The military base, located in the heart of Alaska's rugged wilderness, was one of the most secure facilities in the country, with motion sensors, electric fencing, and armed patrols. They were prepared for any threat, except for this. The bear's behavior defied everything they knew about wild animals. It wasn't attacking, it wasn't afraid. It was simply waiting. As the hours passed and more details emerged, Lieutenant Parker and his team began to realize that the bear wasn't acting out of instinctual fear or hunger. Her tracks, which had circled the base before entering, showed a deliberate, almost calculated movement. She was a mother, and her actions suggested a far deeper urgency than anyone could have imagined. The evidence was mounting. The bear was trying to communicate something important, and it was up to them to uncover what it was. Despite the glaring risks, Parker knew the bear wasn't just any animal. She was seeking help for a reason that was soon to become horrifyingly clear. As the team reviewed security footage and thermal imaging, they discovered that the bear had been watching the base for hours before finally making her move. She was a nursing mother, which raised a terrifying possibility. Her cubs were somewhere out there, in danger. The desperation and intelligence in the bear's eyes were enough to make even the toughest soldiers question their next move. Parker was torn between military protocol and the ethical obligation to act. But he knew one thing: sometimes the right decision doesn't come from a manual. It comes from listening to your instincts. 6 hours into the observation, Parker gathered his team for an emergency meeting. The discussion was intense. Some believed it was too dangerous to follow the bear. Others argued that they couldn't ignore the possibility that this could be the difference between life and death for her cubs. When Sergeant James Miller, the wildlife expert, reported the bear's increasing distress, Parker knew they couldn't wait any longer. The team prepared for an operation that had never been attempted before: rescuing bear cubs trapped in an old mining shaft. The storm outside was intensifying, but the mission had to proceed. The bear had led them through treacherous terrain, as if she knew exactly where she was going. Despite the dangers, the team followed, each step carefully calculated. The air was biting cold, and with each minute, the daylight was slipping away. But the bear, her urgency growing by the second, was determined to lead them to her cubs. As the team reached a clearing, they encountered a scene that would haunt them forever. Trapped deep in an abandoned mining shaft were the bear cubs, barely alive, their bodies weak from exposure to the freezing cold. The walls of the shaft were too smooth for them to climb, and the small opening was too narrow for the mother to reach down and save them. The situation was grim. The cubs had been stuck there for days, struggling to survive. The mother had done everything she could think of, including trying to dig and push them to safety. Lieutenant Parker, heart heavy with the weight of the discovery, immediately contacted the base for additional equipment. They needed ropes, heating systems, and medical supplies, as every second was critical. The temperature was dropping fast, and with it, the risk of the cubs slipping into irreversible shock. But the real challenge lay ahead: how to rescue the cubs without causing the collapse of the shaft or endangering their own lives. The walls were dangerously unstable, and one wrong move could bury them all. The rescue operation began with an intense focus. The soldiers worked quickly, but carefully, setting up their gear and securing the area around the shaft. Every moment felt like an eternity, with the mother bear anxiously watching from a distance. Her calm demeanor as she stood guard, trusting the humans to save her cubs, left everyone in awe. Despite the fear, despite the uncertainty, The bear seemed to understand that these humans might be her cub's last hope. It took everything the soldiers had: steadiness, patience, and precision to lower the harnesses into the shaft. The cubs were terrified, but with the mother's constant encouragement, they slowly began to trust the strange contraption. The team's hearts pounded as the first cub was lifted, every inch of its ascent bringing new dangers. The shaft's walls were fragile, and the temperature was making everything harder. But they didn't stop. They couldn't. The bear's quiet, watchful presence reminded them of the stakes. What happened next would be forever etched in their memories. As the rescue team finally managed to extract both cubs from the shaft, they realized just how much they had underestimated the bond between mother and child. Even in the wild, they had been witnesses to an act of unimaginable courage, one that would not only save lives, but would redefine what it meant to be a protector, no matter the species. The team had no choice but to descend into the perilous shaft. The walls were dangerously unstable, and at any moment, they could collapse completely. The temperature was plummeting as nightfall approached, and there was no guarantee the mother bear would remain calm with humans so close to her cub. Yet, they had to act. It was a choice between attempting a risky rescue or watching the cub perish. Sergeant Miller, the team's wildlife expert, stepped forward without hesitation. He was the best option for safely handling the cub. The others quickly adjusted their gear to create a system that would lower Miller headfirst into the narrow shaft, keeping him secured with multiple safety lines. The mother bear moved closer, her intense gaze fixed on the rescue team. But rather than showing aggression, she watched with an unexpected trust. Miller's descent was agonizingly slow. Each movement caused the unstable shaft walls to crumble, sending streams of debris falling. Below, the temperature was even colder than expected, and the space was so tight that Miller could hardly move his arms. His headlamp illuminated the terrifying reality. The walls were caving in around him. Reaching the cub was only the beginning. It was buried, unresponsive, and breathing shallowly. Miller had to dig around it using only one hand, struggling to keep his position as dirt and ice continued to fall, threatening to entomb them both. Meanwhile, the mother bear, sensing the cub's deteriorating condition, began pacing nervously, her soft sounds filled with distress. The dangerous ascent, the moment Miller secured the cub in his arms, was both a relief and a new worry. As they began to pull him up, disaster struck. A massive section of the shaft wall collapsed, sending a cascade of frozen earth toward them. The team yanked on the safety lines, pulling with all their strength, but the weight of debris was nearly overwhelming. The sound of crumbling earth filled the air, and the ancient mining shaft seemed to be collapsing in real time. Miller curled his body around the cub, protecting it as debris rained down, and the team pulled harder. The mother bear's roars echoed through the clearing, but she stayed in place, perhaps understanding that interfering now would seal the fate of both her cub and its rescuer. The final pull, just as the shaft was about to give way completely, Miller emerged from the wreckage, clutching the lifeless cub against his chest. The rush of cold air greeted them as they were quickly pulled clear of the danger zone. Behind them, the shaft collapsed in a cloud of dust and snow. There was no time to celebrate the escape. The cub was still unresponsive, its small body dangerously cold. The bears trust the mother bear, clearly distressed, moved closer despite her fear of the humans. The team quickly set up an emergency treatment area using their portable heaters and medical supplies. Sergeant Miller, still covered in dirt and ice, worked with the medic to carefully treat the cub. With great care, they raised the cub's body temperature, using warm water bottles, heating pads, and their own body heat. Through it all, the mother bear stayed nearby. When the cub showed signs of distress, she would make soft, comforting sounds. When the team needed to adjust their equipment, she stepped back, allowing them space. Her trust in the humans, once her natural enemies, never faltered. A life saved as the night wore on, the team faced challenges, including running low on medical supplies. Yet, their resolve never wavered. After several tense hours, the cub began to show signs of improvement. It started moving and responding, and its sibling regained enough strength to drink water. The mother bear's posture relaxed as she observed her cubs recovering, and her trust in the humans grew. By morning, both cubs had regained enough strength to move. The mother bear, clearly relieved, prepared to leave the area with her cubs. But before departing, she did something extraordinary. She approached Lieutenant Parker, stopping just a few feet away, and gazed at him for several moments. Then, with a soft huff, she turned and led her cubs back into the wilderness. A change in protocol to rescue had lasting effects. The military base launched a full survey of abandoned mining sites, securing similar hazards, and revised wildlife response protocols, emphasizing rescue efforts over defensive actions. The story of the rescue spread throughout military and wildlife conservation circles, proving that courage sometimes comes from trusting others, even those whom you've been taught to fear. Years later, soldiers at the base occasionally spotted a large female bear with two healthy cubs in the distance. Though they couldn't be sure, it seemed that the bears showed no aggression toward humans, and the bond formed that day had created a unique understanding. What would you do? Would you have trusted your instincts to help the desperate mother bear? Tell us your thoughts in the comments below. A new beginning days turned into weeks after the rescue, and life at the base slowly returned to normal, though something had undeniably shifted. The extraordinary bond between humans and the bears had left its mark on everyone involved. Sergeant Miller, Lieutenant Parker, and the rest of the team often found themselves reminiscing about that night. Their collective sense of pride mingled with the haunting memory of the danger they faced. But none of them could forget the unspoken gratitude from the mother bear, nor the silent promise she had made to them. As for the cubs, they had grown stronger with each passing day, their strength returning rapidly under the care of the team. The soldiers continued their work in the wilderness, securing more hazardous sites and ensuring wildlife safety became a priority. The success of the operation altered military protocols around the world, a realization that in some cases, military personnel were not simply peacekeepers, but also protectors of the natural world. The echo of the bears' months passed, and a quiet sense of unease hung in the air every time the soldiers ventured into the forests near the abandoned mine shafts. The mother bear and her cubs were always somewhere out there, watching from the distance, their presence felt but never fully seen. It became an unspoken rule on the base that no one dared disturb the areas near those old mining shafts. No one knew whether the bears had returned to their home or if they had found new territory. What was certain, however, was that the bond they had created with the human soldiers had irrevocably altered both sides. In the years that followed, military personnel would sometimes catch sight of a large female bear with two cubs in the distance, moving gracefully through the trees. They never approached, respecting the space the bears had reclaimed for themselves. Yet, on a few rare occasions, the soldiers would swear they saw the mother bear pause and glance back toward them, her gaze as calm and serene as it had been during that fateful night. Some of the older soldiers, particularly those who had been part of the rescue operation, spoke of it as though the mother bear had bestowed upon them a gift, a trust that ran deeper than words could explain. They would occasionally share stories of the rescue, reminding younger soldiers that not all wild animals were to be feared, and that courage came not only from strength and aggression, but from understanding and compassion. The legacy of that incredible rescue spread far beyond the military base. Conservationists, wildlife organizations, and even local government officials took notice of the events that transpired. They realized that human intervention could sometimes make the difference between life and death for endangered species, especially when animals were trapped in dangerous situations. Soon after the rescue, a nationwide initiative was launched to secure abandoned mining sites that posed hazards to wildlife. It was a major victory for both environmentalists and the military, showcasing the power of collaboration between different sectors for the greater good. The partnership forged between the soldiers and the bears became a symbol of hope for those dedicated to protecting the natural world. As for the soldiers, they continued their work, but the lesson they had learned from the mother bear remained etched in their hearts. Trust, respect, sacrifice. These were the true qualities that defined the bravery displayed that night. The final moments, and then, one day, years after the rescue, the unthinkable happened. A report came in from a nearby ranger station. A bear had been spotted near one of the military camps. It was a large female, and accompanying her were two cubs, now grown, but unmistakably the same pair that had once been at death's door. They had returned. The team, now long out of active duty, gathered around, gazing at the distant figures moving slowly through the trees. Their eyes locked, and for a moment, time seemed to stand still. It was as though everything had come full circle. The mother bear, as if sensing the presence of the humans who had saved her children, paused. She looked directly at them, and there was an understanding in her eyes, a recognition. She then turned away, her cubs following closely behind her as she led them deeper into the forest. No one moved or spoke for several long moments. It was clear that the story wasn't just about rescuing a bear cub or making a single heroic decision. It was about what came after, the deep, unspoken bond between humans and the wild creatures they had saved. The soldiers, their eyes misty with emotion, silently watched them disappear into the trees. They knew, without a doubt, that the bond between them and the mother bear, her cubs, and the wild had been forged in the most unlikely of circumstances. And they had been changed forever by it,